Terrarian in the Dungeon, Chapter 11b, Fan Fiction by Azazyel. Please subscribe to this YouTube channel for listening and patreon.com/Azazyel to read all of his stories. It's not like they could force me to join their familias for a full year anyway. I muttered as I went over the pros and cons of showing off my safe house building abilities, which would be huge to the land of Orario, not to mention I could have all the huge familias love me by being able to create bosses on demand that they could use to get high quality Excellia, as the first couple floor bosses of Danmachi were in short supply for the hundreds of familias that made Orario home. Because there were plenty of level 3 and 4s in Orario, I mean sure they weren't common or anything, but with the Goliath and the Amphisbaena only spawning once every couple weeks or once a month, there was a reason why there weren't too many high-level adventurers. While helping my Wolfram drone clear out the many corpses of monsters that I made sure to smack over the head with my corpse testing stick, I eventually got tired of repeatedly bending over while trying to pull open the monsters and went over to bully the 3 blue papillos I captured to act as a pixie dust dispenser by just fluffing them against me and getting their healing powder bullshit on myself. So, become my loyal slaves or whatever. I ordered the blue papillos, just flapping their somewhat mangled wings on the ground with their very prominently red glowing eyes showing they were still under the dungeon's control. My only response was a nose-clogging amount of their healing powder being blasted into my face like an overused set of chalk dusters being clapped in front of my face, which made me cough heavily. Thankfully my armor burnt away and blocked the purple moth's poison dust that they love to drop on people, but the armor seemed to allow the healing powder to reach me. Okay, so I am not really into torture, so either you submit, or I will see what happens when I test Terraria physics and how much damage being smashed between blocks does. I warned them, and once again they threw a deluge of healing dust at me, seemingly in hopes that I would suffocate on it. You know what? Fuck you, I don't want a butterfree ripoff. Imma go waifu a Xenos, and you shitty dungeon monsters can just rot. I cursed, and then I killed the damn chalk throwers that had thoroughly clogged up my nose with my space gun. Chitter. Sir Fluffykins the First called out to me, and when I looked over to him, I saw the squirrel repeatedly wiping its face before pointing at me. After getting its message, I wiped my face and felt my hand get coated with the blue papillo's rainbow healing dust. Fuck dungeon monsters. I yelled as I realized that my whole damned face was covered in damned rainbow-colored dust. And then, seemingly drawn to my voice, a little squad of killer ants heard my voice and came at their honestly pretty slow speed, with a mutated killer ant leading the little party. With a loud zapping noise, I simply shot the mutated killer ant and bisected it at the waist, leaving it lying there screaming. The killer ant screeched that would call upon more of their kind. But with the little house behind me, I was fearless when it came to monsters trying to attack me, as my jester arrows would go through them like butter, and they were nowhere near the size they needed to be to walk off having a slow-flying arrow tear through their bodies. After finally dealing with all the monsters and boarding up my little house after I picked up the rest of the ore, I realized something as Sir Fluffykins the First was riding my shoulders up the dungeon lift with my drone also beside me. Can't I just give you a rocket launcher or guns? I asked the squirrel, and the squirrel froze before it leaned over to look me in the eyes before firmly nodding and patting me on the head for the wonderful idea. All right. The operation to make a mini shark for my squirrel is a go. I muttered with Sir Fluffykins the First, shuddering in delight at the thought, as I could actually make a musket pouch so he would have infinite ammo quite easily. After turning in a couple of mutated monster stones along with the rest of my normal monster stones to keep up appearances, I was called off to the side by Rose Fanette, my guild advisor, to discuss my dungeon experience so far as a newbie to the dungeon. So in the last week, you have been stuck to the second floor and being careful with how the dungeon has been changed. That's good news. And your average income is a good deal above average, except for the day you worked with a party apparently. That day was quite beyond average for that day. Rose read off my files and made little notes as she went before the meeting room's door we were in had a loud series of knocking resound. Come in. And here are the 3rd to 5th floor maps you requested. Rose said, pushing the maps over to me, and I compared the maps I got from the disabled adventure outside the dungeon and saw the ones I bought had a lot more details on them and no discrepancies compared to the one the guild gave me. Coming into the room was Ina, and her eyes snapped to me, with her eyes literally glowing behind her spectacles as she smacked down a paper on the table between me and Rose. Jake! You went down to the 9th floor today solo. She yelled at me, and my face froze as I forgot how monsters grew stronger, their monster stones would change slightly and would thus be worth more. And both Ina and Rose were very much in the don't go adventures in the dungeon camp. You have only been an adventurer for not even a week. Why in the world were you that deep in the dungeon? Rose asked, frowning at me. For a moment I thought to deny it or say I was with a party, but I knew those words would be a blatant lie, so I just took a deep breath. Familia secrets, I said using the universal, but the hell out of why I am so special expression people used when people still asked about your skills and such. Plus, Ina. You literally didn't even close the door when you stomped in. Misha is right at the damn door peeking. I said pointedly as Misha cursed and her short hair flashed out of the doorway as she hurriedly went back to work, making Ina's face twitch at my evasion. Anyway, I was hilariously over-prepared to be at that floor depth, and I wasn't alone. I did have a chaperone as I am a mage, I said truthfully. Rose picked up on that and she came to the conclusion that I had a higher-level friendly adventurer who was coaching me basically, as mages always made friends easily, as we were far more valuable typically than just another sword-wielding warrior. After Rose asked me a couple more questions about what I was doing in the dungeon, and I firmly and somewhat truthfully answered how I was standing as far away as I could to cast my magic upon my foe, she gave me even more maps of the dungeon to try to memorize. Just be careful, Jake, even level 3s can get overwhelmed in the early parts of the dungeon if the dungeon is feeling vindictive enough, Rose warned me, and I nodded, taking her words to heart as I mentally made a note to further reinforce the killing room on the 9th floor of the dungeon. Then the red-haired beauty strode away back to work as I put the maps into my inventory, and I went on my merry way to ask Seshet if we could make a deal with Loki or Ganesha to have their middle-level adventurers escort me into the dungeon and make little safe zones and just help me with the bosses I could summon. Because making safe zones in the dungeon that said dungeon couldn't break would be a feat worthy of the Fauna giving me a skill that my Terraria abilities wouldn't mess with.